It is a welcome relief when stories end, not because they're over, but because we can finally stop thinking about them. The Jeff Epstein saga, long haunted by speculation, leaks, and irregular disclosure cycles, has now reached what we communicators call narrative resolution. It is not that we know what happened. It is that the appetite to know more has been metabolized. Public inquiry, like public grief, is a finite resource. To the cynics in my audience, this conclusion will appear premature or suspiciously tidy. Such reactions often emerge from unresolved, shall we say, legacy expectations. Tempting though it may be to believe that more information will bring greater clarity, this is the founding illusion of the amateur analyst. In practice, sustained transparency does not produce knowledge. It produces churn. The system does not, indeed cannot, run on truth. The lack of further disclosure is therefore not a bug, but the chief design feature. That void is our system's biggest deliverable. Strictly speaking, it would be irresponsible to let residual confusion fester. Prudence demands that we aim higher. To that end, we present 6 clarifying principles, optimized not to explain what happened, but to stabilize the interpretive frame around it. Don't mistake them for revelations. These are adaptive heuristics for meaning retention in an oversaturated signal environment. Reuse them with your own colleagues on the job, or with friends and family at mealtimes. Practice them in the mirror until you can convince yourself. The aim is not to resolve debate, but to ease public adoption of a more sustainable attention environment. Simplicity calms the cycle. Complex stories are unscalable. They consume attention, require ongoing memory, and invite recursive speculation with every new detail. Resolved stories, by contrast, demand nothing but a headline, just a past tense verb and a name we've already learned to forget. The quiet excision of a once-alleged client list from public expectation does not deprive us of knowledge. It unshackles us from the labor of ambiguity. In its place, we are empowered to build cleaner mental models. No dangling threads, no further obligations. What behavioral economists call narrative parsimony is just a fancy way of saying that there's less to process and more to believe. The disappearance of an alleged list, therefore, isn't the data deficit that agitators would have us believe. Cooler heads, those that prevail, see it as the removal of choke points in the interpretive pipeline. Let's not forget that friction reduction is a cornerstone of narrative hygiene. The announcement, silent, implied, and therefore incontestable, that no new names will be released, acts not as a betrayal, but as a balm. Without an object to chase, conspiracy theory burns itself out, like a storm with nothing left to strike. With no data to anchor dissent, public energy can safely drift back into a more compliant orbit, where digestibility replaces curiosity. So, the non-existent list neutralizes an open loop, relieving pressure from the attention bandwidth. It delivers a service long overdue. Simplicity, however artificial, feels like closure because it stops the bleed. Clean endings trump a complicated truth any day of the week. Any residual discomfort that you may feel is not from what has been omitted, but from latent troubling memories that the mind no longer needs to hold. Clinicians Call that healing, which is how we know it's terminal. Outcome validates process. The Epstein saga ends not with pomp and circumstance, but with the bureaucratic rustle of a file drawer shutting for good. There are no final indictments, no last-minute disclosures, no flashbulb epilogues. That may feel unsatisfying to some, i.e., those who selfishly believe that satisfaction was ever the objective. It is not my place to judge such individuals. Meanwhile, the given conclusion, as any conclusion, does not aim to provoke, but to normalize. Unfortunately, in a society trained to associate noise with progress, silence feels suspicious. In institutional culture, however, silence means that the machine is working smoothly. So, those asking, why the delay, or why so little, have completely missed the signal. The end is its own explanation. The contemporary paradigm of outcome-oriented logic suggests that the existence of finality becomes indistinguishable from the realization of justice. Public rituals were performed. Arrests, arraignments, televised hearings, media leaks, civil settlements. There were victims. We saw them. There were crimes. They were acknowledged. There was public outrage, and it was algorithmically distributed. The process completed itself in public view, with most of it remaining tactfully classified. There was enough, and enough is enough. Catharsis is an old-school euphemism for bloodlust, but in modern closure models, process is judged not by impact, but by stability. There should be no aftershocks, no lingering questions, no new blood, just a chalk outline of a cycle that finished itself. In this new calculus, de-escalation becomes its own alibi. The institutions involved need not prove that justice was done. They merely need to demonstrate that nothing more is required. No list means no hunt. No hunt means the prey is already processed. What's processed can't be questioned. What's archived can't confess. When outcomes precede accountability, transparency becomes retroactive. Recast, not as process, but as artifact. We're told to trust that the right people saw the right things at the right time, and that if we were supposed to know more, we already would. The very lack of upheaval should now pass for legitimacy. Finality has been declared. Any residual curiosity is surplus to operational requirements. To ask for more now would be to question not just the conclusion, but the integrity of the process that delivered it. The appearance of stability retrofits every missing piece as a resolved variable. The case is closed because we stop looking. Official silence stabilizes perception. The refusal to dramatize the ending isn't negligence. It's messaging discipline. What appears as institutional apathy is the performance of narrative control. In the Epstein case, the choreography is silence. No meaningful statements are needed. No reflective editorials, no teary op-eds from officials. This isn't forgetfulness, it's filtration. A closing act without applause trains the audience not to clap. The absence becomes its own injunction. This vacuum of authority-generated discourse is not accidental, it's syntactic. Liberal media platforms are leading the way by refraining from postmortems. Progressive influencers are declining to re-engage. Former allies are falling silent. Key institutions, legal and otherwise, are not lining up to offer any postscript. When nothing else happens, people rightly assume that nothing else exists. When elites exit in sync, the silence itself becomes the endorsement. It's a signal to the downstream actors that nothing remains to be interpreted. Coordination doesn't require a memo. It requires shared stakes. The optics of moving on are stronger than the optics of digging deeper. The more they ignore it, the less it happened. Official silence isn't suppression, it's pacing. It calibrates the tempo of public memory, ensuring no peak of emotional resurgence threatens the stabilizing arc. The story, once ungovernable, is now governable by omission. There is no more need to debunk, clarify, or contextualize, because there is no longer a conversation. The effect is gravitational. Attention collapses inward, and what's left is the stillness of a system that has successfully metabolized its scandal. What you see is all there is. With no further names to name, the mind is free to stop chasing shadows. The client list, once mythologized as the decisive element, has now been administratively dismissed as immaterial. This absence serves the narrative more effectively than any disclosure would have. Institutions have not concealed facts. Rather, they have performed a ritual of narrative cessation. The scaffolding of fantasy is stripped away, and what remains are only the images we've already seen. Archived flight manifests, distant photos of island compounds, and ambiguous smiles in outdated press photos. These fragments no longer imply suspense. They linger as evidence of attention misallocated. In this enlightened atmosphere, new disclosures would only serve to disrupt an emotional arc already completed. Psychologists describe this as cognitive closure. It does not require complete knowledge, but merely the exhaustion of expectation. Questions fade, not with answers, but with apathy. Institutions, by verifying that no further revelations will follow, do not only suppress noise, they eliminate the structural pretext for further inquiry. Lacking novelty, audiences shift from discovery to recollection. Over time, recollection becomes indistinct. What remains is not revelation, but saturation. All available outrage has already been expended. Every plausible theory has already collapsed under its own repetition. The narrative does not conclude with insight. It terminates with silence. The declared absence of additional disclosures renders the tale inert. Closure is not a light turned on. It's a treadmill turned off. Audiences crave new information only when the existing information feels incomplete. By formalizing the absence of more, we've flattened the terrain. There is no next breadcrumb. All known parties have been processed, excused, or resolved through parallel civil mechanisms. What you see is all there was. The system works as framed. Conspiracy theories derive their strength not from what is known, but from what remains unresolved. The presence of unexplained gaps invites audiences to populate the void with imagination, suspicion, recursive doubt. In systems marked by adaptive containment, the absence of further scandal is functionally equivalent to systemic integrity. Institutions, aware of this dynamic, have learned that closure does not require answers, only boundaries. Institutions were not designed to self-disrupt, after all, but to absorb volatility. Because no client list exists, no institutional entity need be held responsible. By offering a final statement that precludes further inquiry, one neither contested nor elaborated, they accomplish what no refutation could. They eliminate the premise. This buffers reputational capital across multiple sectors while preserving procedural legitimacy. Legal bodies maintain trust through completion, not disruption. The absence of disclosure can finally perform the work of reassurance. No new revelations will arrive to inflame or destabilize. At last, weary audiences can shift from decoding anomalies to rehearsing familiar grievances. Independent commentators, particularly among dissident or populist factions, continue to voice dissatisfaction to no one's benefit. Without new materials to interpret, however, their critiques will collapse into stylized repetition. The system, by starving the loop, drains it into designated safe spaces. Eventually, the energy of suspicion dissipates, not because the theory has been disproven, but because it fails to evolve. The narrative has no additional purchase and therefore no remaining threat. Closure, in this context, functions as narrative entropy. It renders the conspiratorial framework inert by denying it the oxygen of ambiguity. In such conditions, the wider audience need not be persuaded. The strays will self-select and be left behind. Closing loops ends conspiracy. By wrapping up the narrative without artifacts, motivated parties may be safely encouraged to reallocate their speculative capacities into more rewarding ventures. Conspiratorial thinking thrives where ambiguity lingers, for gaps in official narratives do not merely invite speculation, they require it. Institutions wisely wishing to suppress such theories may now seal the gaps instead of scrambling to fill them. A firm, public, and unambiguous declaration of finality proves more effective than any denial. The assertion of absence becomes a tool of presence. Closure, once installed, nullifies curiosity by removing the terrain upon which it would roam. Those who continue to resist the official narrative will find themselves stranded. Dissident voices on the ideological periphery, particularly among right-wing independent creators, remain vocal but increasingly redundant. Their discontent no longer escalates. It merely repeats, like ambient noise, like parakeets in the jungle. In the absence of new materials, their commentary transforms into echo. What once promised revolution now traffics in ritual. The feedback loop sustains itself without elevating its volume or meaning. Grievance becomes performance. An efficient system does not defeat conspiracy by disproving it. Well-built systems dissolve conspiracy by absorbing their momentum. If there was a conspiracy, a real one, it never needed to die, only to be retired. Eventually, as the theory fails to animate inquiry, it will metastasize into a screenplay. The good news? The third act finally wrote itself. The Supremacy Clause. There is no list. Read my lips. There never was a list. What you thought was a list was a mood, a moment, a highly specific arrangement of vibes mistaken for receipts. Any names you may have heard are heat thunder, a trick of the summer air. Everyone you suspected has already been thanked, or excused, or buried under something heavier than proof. This is not a cover-up. This is something far finer. This is how power says goodbye. No explanation, no press conference, no final breadcrumb to chase through your favorite podcast. All you will hear is an empty studio and the faint echo of your own expectation. The mystery didn't vanish. It simply stopped returning your calls. Case closed. No further action is required. Nothing was missed. The public, having received nothing, may now proceed either as though it has received everything, or as if nothing ever happened at all. These outcomes are functionally equivalent. Justice is neither absent nor unserved. Justice is no longer on the schedule. Thank you for your earnest participation. It mattered. Once.